let out a moan and got comfortable.
This is the word to the wise, huh?
When I graduated from high school, I wound up in San Francisco where my dad was living and working at the time. And I had a job with Sears Roebuck in their mail order department. A couple of guys in there were old sailors had been through World War II together, the Pacific, and they were always telling war stories and carrying on with me. And so anyway, I got interested in and during high school in the World War II, most boys, we were very patriotic in those days, and I went to school an hour early every day so I could get out a semester early and go into the service to help fight the Japs. And so by the time I graduated in '46, the war was over, so I'd kind of wasted all my time getting up early, going to school. But anyway, I wound up, I thought I'd join the Army and get the GI Bill. And they had an 18-month enlistment, and I thought I could stay in the Army for 18 months. So I got off work and got on a streetcar and went downtown, got off at the wrong stop, and I realized that between the stop I got off and the Army recruiting office, the Marine Corps recruiting office was on the way. So I thought I'd stop in there. Cause, excuse me, I'm out of breath, you can tell. But I had earlier gone up to the Navy office, had my physical, and was going to join the Navy, but you had to join till you were a period of minority, the day before you're 21. And I was just 17, and I didn't want to spend that much time in the Navy. So I didn't follow through. I just took my physical and forgot it. Well, I stepped on the way to the Army recruiting office, I walked by the Marine Corps office, and so I just stuck my head in the door and I said, the sergeant was sitting at his desk, I said, "Hey, Sergeant, what's your shortest term of enlistment?" And he said, 2 years. And I was standing there thinking about it, and he said, "But if you're going to join, you're going to have to do it now because this is the last day. It's got a period of minority after this." So he said, "Come on in." So I stepped inside and started talking to him, and he said, and it was late in the afternoon. He said, "I'm sorry, kid." He said, "This ain't gonna work." He said, "You have to have a physical and everything, and there's no time for that. These Navy doctors over here are booked up and they can't handle you." And I got up to leave, and I said, "Well, Sergeant," I said, I had a physical over there a couple of weeks ago when I was thinking about joining the Navy." He said, "Sit down, kid." So he jumps up and he goes through the door, and he's gone about 3 or 4 minutes, comes back with a stack of papers. He says, "You're in, boy, sit down." And so anyway, then since I was 17, I couldn't join on my own. And he said, "You got to have your dad's signature." And my dad was working there in town because I was staying with him at the time. So I called his shop where he was working and asked him if he would come by. So he did. He came by and signed me in. And all the other boys, they were waiting around, and they had signed up. They had already taken them down to the train station because it was an overnight trip from San Francisco to San Diego where boot camp was. And so they signed up. The sergeant said, "Come on, son." He put me in his Jeep and drove me down to the train station. I got on the train, got up the next morning, and I was a Marine. and I had taken a CRIP course in high school in typing, and I couldn't type 10 words a minute, but I did take the course. And because I'd done that, I got sent to San Francisco to work in the Marine Depot supplies, and that's where, and there was what we call a gold brick in the Marine Corps, That's the guy who always looked good, but he never did anything. And but he was a member of the Church of Christ, and nobody else was religious. And of course, I wasn't anything either at the time, but I had gone to church when I was a kid in Atlanta, and so he invited me several times to go with him to church there in San Francisco. And finally, I said, "Okay, I'll go." Well, when I went a couple of times, I met a young fellow there who was from Kansas, but a civilian and working there in San Francisco. And we became really good friends. And so we were, as my time was running out in the Marines and I was going to get discharged, we talked about going to school. He wanted to go to Pepperdine. And by this time I had been converted by people in the Church of Christ. And I didn't want to go to school in California. I told him I wanted to go to Georgia to go to school. And so a lady came by with her son there to the church there in San Francisco. We met with them, and her son had been kicked out of ACC, Abilene Christian, for behavior problems of some kind. But he said it was my fault. It was a good school and everything. So we compromised and went to Abilene Christian. And when he went on when school started. I didn't get discharged till the end of September, so I was a month late getting there. And I had to go to the dean's office. Well, there were a couple of little girls there in the dean's office whose job was to keep people out of the dean's office who really didn't need to see the dean. And so I was cutting up with them and so on and so forth, and made it a little point that I was going to ask one of those girls for a date when I got settled in. Well, I've had a little trouble remembering faces too well. And so when I thought I saw the girl that was in the dean's office that I wanted to date, I asked her for a date and started dating her. And then ran into Jean in the post office one day. What we call that? The building where we ran into each other. Anyway, I had the post office and the bookstore and so on. There was an L shape there. And we just met at that corner, and I knocked all of her books out of her hand and reached down, picked them up, apologized, gave them to her. And she started walking off, and I remembered, wait a minute. So I reached back and grabbed her, pulled her back around, and started talking. And I said, do you have a date for I said, would you like to go to the play with me Friday night? This was Thursday. And she said, well, yes. So we went to the school play on the campus. And then when I took her back to the dorm, I said, would you like to go to the football game with me tomorrow? She said, well, yes. So we went to the football game. I haven't thought about this in a while. But anyway, we got back from the football games. I said, well, would you like to go to church with me in the morning? And so we've been going steady ever since. Anyway, we finally got married. Well, we dated that year, got married the next fall, September of 49, and the rest is history. And this is sort of the result of all that.
Wow.
That's why you're here tonight.
Thank you.